Go through a couple of announcements, and then I'm going to give an introduction to the Zero Net Energy approach and how Greenpoint Rated is supporting that, and kind of what it's looking like given the context of some of the policies. Most of this information should not be new. And then I'm going to turn it over to Sean Armstrong. Many of you may be familiar with him. He is partner and founder of Redwood Energy. They're based in Arcata, and he can give you more information on their firm, but I would characterize them as a firm that has been delivering the largest number of net zero energy homes or near net zero energy affordable projects, both single family and multifamily in California. And so I just want to hear more about what it's like kind of providing that consulting perspective, what are some of the issues with the projects, how to kind of bring people along, because that's what we're looking at. So to take you through a couple of announcements, you can see Rater Council is here for the remainder of the year, second Thursday of every week. And, we are doing, topics that are current with kind of the policies that are happening within the state and relevant topics. So if there's something specific that you guys are coming up against in your project consultations or designs, please let us know, and we want to make sure we can work that in to support that. So the next thing I just wanted to talk about was high-rise multifamily compliance with the version 6. We've had a number of issues with the 6.7 software of Energy Pro, and so we're allowing submissions using the Savings by Design module. So try that, see which one is working better for you in your project. There's a number of things that cannot be modeled in the 6.7. Fan energy is a big issue there. You can't model VFDs. There's some issues with the baseline of HVAC, and so using the Savings by Design module, which is still within 6.7, so you don't have to uninstall, reinstall, kind of takes care of that, and you can use the information from Util 1. So let me know if that's not working for folks, and we can assist you in that. Okay. Just a heads up that we are going to be looking at the 2016 code and how the variation for Greenpoint Rated needs to be adjusted for that. And we're going to be taking a little different approach for energy compliance since we introduced a ZNE threshold, or not threshold, but standard last year. This year for our energy compliance, we're going to be evaluating, not just the traditional percent above code, but also looking at a percent towards ZNE. I think most of the measure variation should be kept to a minimum. Couple trainings coming up. We got C2EP in Folsom, April 18th, and GPR Core May 19th in Oakland. So if those are useful to you or any of your colleagues or employees, please check them out on our website and get yourself registered. Okay, so let's jump into ZNE and kind of the road ahead and where we're going 2020 and 2030. Hopefully nothing on this slide is new to anybody in terms of policy changes that are driving us towards this goal with our reductions for GHG emissions below 1990, with thresholds set for 2020, 2030, 2040, and 2050, where we're looking at 80% below. We also had the slew of legislation passed this summer with SB 375, tying regional transportation to housing and making that connection. SB 350, which is looking at a renewable, and a 50% increase in efficiency in existing buildings. So a lot of this is kind of raising to the fore, one, energy efficiency and greenhouse gas emissions. You can also see SB 350 includes EV charging. So what this legislation is doing, and a number of programs are doing this too, is a very different shift in our metrics. Oftentimes we're looking at kWh in therms only, and for programmatic metrics or local goals, but now we're starting to see GHG emissions being a priority in terms of the metrics of success, or what we're trying to address. So the legislation is steering towards that. We've had water rebates issued through the Greenhouse Gas Emissions Fund. Just hold on. Sorry about that, folks. I'm traveling on a train right now. Let's see. I never see that. I do this. So the other thing you can look at, TCAC has a ZNE option, which is also a shift in the way they're looking at things and not just energy efficiency compliance of that code. Greenpoint rated, we're looking at a shift for our next version, and we have a ZNE measure within our current rating system. So a lot of this is allowing us to kind of look more broadly at energy use in our homes and buildings and increasing the opportunities. The other thing I wanted to share with you all is ordinance adoption. And so Build a Green has been working extensively with local jurisdictions recently and trying to identify opportunities for adoption of ordinances that are going to address, energy efficiency goals, help them meet state goals, including AB 32, also meet goals in their climate action plans. And so what you're seeing here is just this kind of example and suite of ordinances that folks are adopting to meet their goals. So we are seeing some traditional green building ordinances, Cal Green Tier 1. Then we're seeing some non-traditional ones just focusing on PV panels, similar to what we see in Lancaster, where it's like a 2 kW system. EV charging stations for single-family, multifamily, and non-residential water measures. That's becoming a big focus, and folks are trying to think about regional approaches to water conservation. And then we're also seeing folks look at ZNE. Now, some of these are mandatory, some of them are voluntary, but this is a kind of suite of things that we're seeing kind of out there in the landscape to be coming through for the next code cycle. So just quickly kind of how we're supporting ZNE, and hopefully this is just a reminder for you all that we have the near zero energy pathway, which is an 80% offset. You can have gas in a home like that. And then we have our ZNE standard. You get this additional designation on your certificate for the project, but it's 100% offset and it's all electric, and it's because we're using carbon as that metric, that lens, that umbrella of where we're trying to get to. And that's how we frame our threshold. And so within that, we are framing it, like I said, under that umbrella as carbon, but then we're also looking at the entire uses of the home. So again, going beyond our regulated loads that we find in our compliance software, we're looking at being more comprehensive in the end uses. So appliances, laundry, cooking are included in there, as well as your DHW and that distribution and heating and cooling. So it's a comprehensive evaluation of the end uses for the home. So we get that total energy use, electrical and or gas, as well as water. And what we're looking at reporting out on is energy savings, water savings, and GHG. And so Sean's going to talk to you a lot more about different projects, but I want to at least we have certified 2 projects, and another one's kind of in the pipeline. You can see kind of very small there, that little designation next to the platinum certification level. But we got a multifamily development that's 61 units and a single family project, 1 unit, a production builder. And then we're looking at the in progress is the single family 48 home development. So we're pretty excited about that. And what does that mean for us as Build It Green next step? Hopefully more ZNE homes. We're working closely with our marketing communications to have more information on our website, be able to do press releases, have case studies if that's appropriate, showcase these projects, and really demonstrate kind of the variety of projects out there that can meet ZNE and prove that it's viable. We're also launching the calculator for ZNE, which will be a web-based interface. And so right now I'm asking you to contact me to do some calculations, but you'll be able to do them online through this web-based interface. And as we move forward, we're going to continue to try to address carbon and water and looking for innovations there where we can add measures, continuing to push the industry and bring it along, to address drought conditions, to address water conservation goals, and to meet 2020, 2030, and 2050 goals for our carbon savings. So that about does it for me. That's kind of giving you that perspective. Let me just see if there's any kind of questions. If anyone has any questions for me, you can just type them in. I'll be here, and we can address them throughout the presentation. But I'd like to turn it over to Sean, who can talk more about the specific projects he's been working on and what it's like to work with a developer and kind of bring him through the process to meet their goals for ZNE.
Okay.
So with that, Sean, I'm gonna change it over to you to be presenter, and I'm gonna mute myself so you can have the floor.
Okay then. One second here. Show my screen. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yes? All right then.
Yes.
Great. So hey everybody. I'm in my home office right now up in Arcata. I've got a sod roof on my little building here, and I can see perennial cauliflower growing in my garden and my solar panels up in my roof. So this is a presentation by Redwood Energy, and what you're looking at is a photograph of the nation's first 100% solar-powered apartment complex, and you can see the redwoods in the distance. This happened in Arcata. I'm going to lead you through how essentially we've built a big practice around doing 100% solar-powered housing, or nearly 100%, depends upon the project, and how it got financed and some of the things that I've learned. So, briefly, Sean, I'm the project manager. I started back in like 1995 or so, giving tours of this demonstration house at Humboldt State University's campus. And I was a science teacher. I got my teaching credential. I went to work for a developer locally because they didn't have any teaching jobs. They were pink slipping back during the sort of the middle 2000s, during the Schwarzenegger era. There was a lot of fights with the teachers' unions. So I went to work for a developer and innovated with them, and I'll show you some zero-net energy housing that's taken me a long ways now. So then my partner Michael, this guy, I love Michael. He's the technical lead, or was the technical lead on the world's first cell phone system way back in '79 for Motorola. He spent decades in telecommunications. He helped design the world's most efficient hydrogen fuel cell. And then he too lost his job in the recession, like I did with the developer called Danco. And we started this business together to design zero-net energy housing. That's our goal. He built the first zero-net energy house. It was off-grid in Mountain View back when he was, in the scene down in the Silicon Valley in '96. And I helped install the solar panels on his house in 2001 when I was just interning with the solar installer. So that's Michael. As Amy said, we're working on not burning the dinosaurs, keeping them in the ground, and we're trying to implement zero-net energy in a way that is consistent, not with using natural gas, but instead all electric, zero carbon, which is the standard for Build It Green, obviously, International Living Building Challenge, Obama's energy initiatives, actually, if you look at the language carefully, you understand they're specific to trying to get rid of gas. So let me talk about some of the projects. You guys are all project-oriented people. The first one we got to do, 2006, it was a 50% solar-powered project. I didn't do the one in 2007, Solara. That one, both of our projects were 50% solar offset. The way that we did it on the top was natural gas was offset with solar thermal, about 50%, and then we were offsetting the electric demand, about 50%. Solara did it with all PV, which is the way that I support these days. What we were innovating back in the day with this idea of doing multifamily tenant serving, not owner serving, tenant serving energy arrays. Now, the first ones that actually happened that were awesome, Plaza Point here on the right, the brightly colored one, and then on the left, Astor Place. In the same year, we pulled out these two projects with Danco. They're all electric. They're using heat pumps for water heaters, heat pumps for space heating. They're LEED Platinum, etc. But one of the things that I think is really interesting to understand, when we're looking at whole communities, we can see that not everyone is zero net energy, even if the project is net positive. So on the right-hand side, Plaza Point is net positive. It was designed to be an 80% offset. It performs a little bit better than 100% offset, And nonetheless, more than half the households, 15 of the 29, are net negative. And the 14 households that are net positive are the ones that are carrying the whole project, essentially, to be neutral. That's how it is everywhere. And I'll show you lots and lots of graphs to illustrate that houses, an individual house, cannot be predicted reliably. It doesn't matter how consistent the number of people are, the apartment, everything else. It's just not how it is. You can see on the lower left-hand corner an illustration of this. This is 16 different tenants. This is their electricity use for a place in Oakland. And you can see that from the lowest user in pink to the highest user in green, you have in any given month about a 6-fold difference between the lowest and the highest users. And that's everywhere. This little canary instrument that you see in the middle, this is a way that I'm trying to innovate in educating tenants about their relative energy consumption to a budget. We'll get into that a little bit more. So you can see these are cool projects, all electric. So then, how we finance this. So Amy showed that one of the multifamily zero net energy projects is this one, Mutual Housing in Spring Lake in Woodland. In order to go zero net energy, they had to put a big old solar array on and do it all electric. That cost more. The additional cost was about $800,000, I think. But they made total in rental revenue when the building closed, like the permanent loan, when the bank comes in and says, here's your money to pay for your construction, they essentially made a profit. They were able to show the bank at the moment the loan is closing that they were going to have $92,000 a year in additional rent because they lowered the utility bills and they were able to raise the rent by the exact same dollar amount. So the solar credit gets converted into rent. And in that process, they were given about a $1.3 million additional loan at the end of the day for about an $800,000 expense. The $500,000 of additional funds are money that that developer can use to develop more housing. This is a big deal. And it is a big deal for almost all my owners. And they can raise the rent, which I recommend for market rate and single family, like any housing, you don't give away the benefit, you charge it. And when you charge for it, it makes financial sense. So that's the big take home. Just, cost should be passed on, and then this is not a big deal. So then next, I want to show you some costs so you can understand what this really looks like on another project. This one is in Fortuna. So if you look line by line, high performance heat pumps, that's for space heating, cost an extra $3,000 above the 2008 code. So we're in a whole different world, by the way. As a side note, I've had 7 of my projects run in the 2016 code, and what it looks like is that the 100% Energy Star zero net energy design strategies that we've been using look like the 2016 code. Our projects that were 50% above the 2008 code and 30% above the 2013 code are now 0% above the 2016 code. So this cost that I'm showing you here, this is what it kind of looks like to comply with the 2016 code, because this is an equivalent project to a code passing today. So it costs $3,000 for heat pumps, $300-ish for HERS commissioning. It was about $10,000 for the solar array after rebates. It saved them about $758 to not use an on-demand gas water heater, which costs $3,500 to install, and instead use a heat pump water heater. It saved them like $750 per apartment to do that. A little more installation, the cost per unit at $12,500. The whole cost was about $440,000, and they made that loan that I just mentioned previously. They got a $430,000 additional loan. So zero net energy cost them $10,000 for 35 apartments. I mean, it's ridiculous. That deal is a good deal.
Hey, Sean, can I ask you 2 questions on this project?
Please.
One question on doing the 2016. So were you guys using the beta software just to kind of see the comparison of these projects under 2008 to 2016? Were you using the beta software to do that, or?
I sent it to Deanne Ross, and Deanne ran she's the person who wrote the user manual for CBEC Res, and so she ran it herself.
Cool.
And I think she's using the most current version of it, is what she said.
Yeah, okay. And then the other question is in terms of these numbers of savings. So I see you've got the savings for plumbing. So you're saving there. Is there also a savings for gas meters, or was that a factor in this project, or is it just a factor in other projects?
That's a good question, and no. When this cost breakdown happened, the gas meters were not included. The trick is that PG&E sometimes will give you a credit for hooking people up, so the cost of the gas meter set sometimes appears in front of the developer and sometimes doesn't. So
Okay.
I just didn't include it in the thinking because it's a little too tricky to figure it out. Okay, so let me show you what this kind of looks like. On the left-hand side, I'm trying to show water. In the middle, I'm trying to show space heating, and then down below is appliances. And on the right-hand side, I've got some insulation issues in the solar. Just to quickly give you what this visually means. I'm trying to show on the left-hand upper side, it costs $1,800 to install a heat pump water heater. That's a bidded cost. I've seen it on many projects now. It's $1,800. I'm sure you could pay $2,200 for it, but you can definitely also pay $1,800 for a federal prevailing wage tax credit affordable housing project. Now below that, the $12,000, that's a Daikin Therma, and there's a similar product called the AirMech ANK, and these are products that use compressors to heat water, and then that water, either chilled or heated, is used for air conditioning or space heating / domestic hot water. They combine the systems with one set of compressors, but to note, the controls are expensive. They're like $1,500 of the expense there is the controls to switch from heating to cooling, and that actually makes it a more expensive system. You'd think you'd save money by combining everything, but it makes it more expensive, not less. The AirMech down below, that big tank, that's for central systems, and that can do central boilers, like heating water, or it can do central for heating space water, heating air conditioning water, domestic hot water, domestic chilled water. You have 4 pipes coming out of it. That is less expensive to install per house for a multifamily, but more expensive to operate. I'll go into some details, but there's some issues there. So you can see up at the top, ductless mini split heat pumps. You can see in the center, $6,500 for a ducted system. So it depends upon your heating load and how much air you need to move around, which one you want to go with. LED bulbs are just the same cost as CFLs these days. The Energy Star appliances are essentially the same cost. You can see that everyone would have sort of a different cost, I think, for what it costs for them to do additional insulation. But I'd say now that essentially that $1,000 is just eaten up. That's not an additional cost. That's what it costs to do code minimum. We had $700 in commissioning that I put in. That's throwing the book at it, everything we do. And then at the bottom, note I'm saying here, there's a difference in cost per bedroom for apartments versus houses. And it's big because apartments and houses use different amounts of energy. We'll go into that below, but I have that $4,500 per apartment bedroom versus $11,000 per house bedroom. It doesn't have to be that expensive, but it was being real there. Okay, so let me show you how this can work out. This is a real case. This is an owner of a project in Sacramento. This is a central system that we're talking about, and their goal was underwriting. You see the underwriting goal in small text. It says $55,000 in sort of the upper right. The current utility bills for this whole project are $97,000. Real project. It's under construction now. We first looked at saying, well, let's do solar thermal offsets, and we got the bill down to about $81,000. Then we said, okay, what if we did a PV only offset? That got us down to $57,000. But we had to fuel switch the gas boilers to heat pumps. And that's what we did. That's what's happening right now, is that there are 12 boilers in there. 11 of them are literally brand new, 1 year old, and they're all getting pulled out and being replaced with 80-gallon heat pumps, because that is the financially most sensible thing to do. Now note at the bottom, we did a run with PV and solar thermal while keeping the gas in. And what we found is that the inability to offset more than about 60% of a gas load for solar thermal, for 60% of domestic hot water load, means that not only are you spending more money up on the roof, but you're getting less benefit. So that's how this owner is moving forward. They're yanking out the boilers, putting in heat pumps, putting PV on the roof to offset the new electrical demand, and making money. Are there any questions about that? I know a little unconventional thinking, but just want to let people absorb that. Okay. Next one. Oh, I'm sorry, that slide went in twice. Apologies. Here we go. So I want to go a little bit about how resident education can change behavior, or not. A lot of people think that people's behavior will change significantly with education. What I've found is that throwing the book at it gets people down to maybe 5% savings. And throwing the book at it means like giving them a meter on the wall that gives them an energy budget that's color-coded, sending them letters every month, comparing their use to that of their neighbors. You can do a lot with people. But if any of you guys have a spouse or a partner in your life, if you ask them to change their behavior with all of the leverage that you have, withholding this or withholding that, food, intimacy, you'll see that very little behavior changes. Even when it's all out there, like I'm going to divorce you, that kind of thing, you can barely get people to budge. And it's no different when it comes to energy and water, except it's less so. People just don't change their behavior that much. And I would argue that it's more important to install more conserving equipment than it is to try to educate people and save 5%. Is about what you could reasonably assume if you're doing a good effort. Next slide then. I want to show you, check this out. So we have here on the left-hand side of this bar graph, apartments up here in Arcata. And then in darker green, we have apartments in the Mojave Desert. So these have slightly different envelope mechanisms and such, so they're not the same apartments, but they're essentially the best efforts that are cost-effective in both climate zones. And now look at what happens when you go to the houses that are right next to the apartments with all the same energy efforts that we put, slab insulation, 2x6 walls with R19 or R21. Go down the list. And you see their consumption is way high, and it's the same in the Central Valley. There's slightly different conservation measures there, but we couldn't get it lower than about 6,400 no matter what because of the envelope issues. We would have to do something very significantly different in the construction to get that envelope to behave like an apartment's envelope, something kind of radical even. So I want everyone to understand houses use 20 to 40% more energy than the same size apartments in the same climate. Over there on the right-hand side, just a cute. Those are 25 little houses in Fort Bragg that are zero net positive, about 130%. And there's enough energy for people to drive, everyone to drive about 5,000 miles a year in an electric car with their existing solar array already offsetting the house. So this is kind of a big deal too. People don't know this, but plug loads and domestic hot water loads are almost half of the energy consumption in most of California after you've made an efficient envelope. After you've done like new construction or insulation, it's a big deal. It's a large amount of energy. And this is apartments, so this is a little different for houses where you'd have the envelope obviously bumping up the energy. So putting that out there, these are apartments. This is what I deal with all the time, which is plug loads, which I can barely deal with. That's the biggest load. Domestic hot water is this huge thing. And because people share their envelopes, heating and cooling are not that much of a deal. In new construction right now in California, 80% of the new construction on the coast is multifamily. Think about that. Like, it's almost all multifamily on the coast. And then in the Central Valley, it's reversed. About 80% of it in the Central Valley is single-family homes. So you know what kind of housing stock you might be working with depending upon where you live. This is another neat thing to see. We went through this big battery exercise. Everyone's talking about batteries these days. The cheapest battery is the water heater. That's designed to be a thermal battery. It's already built for that purpose. And you can just raise the temperature of it up to maybe 160 degrees and put a tempering valve, and that's how you can store energy for what we saw was the largest controllable load in the house, the domestic hot water, where you can store that energy off peak hours and then use it during the day and never have to turn it on. So when people talk about batteries, keep that one in mind. I did mention earlier the Daikinol Therma, and I wanted to just sort of push on this. When you're looking at the central photo, look at that box in the middle there. That's the controllers. And I mentioned before, that's a $1,500 box. All it's doing is controlling heating and cooling. It looks like an on-demand water heater, and it's controls. And I want people to remember that when you combine systems like a variable refrigerant flow system for a big apartment building, or an air mech which does hydronic as opposed to refrigerant, or in this case, the smaller house version of this, I would say that controls are the more controls, the more expensive, the more likely things fail. So I'm not really a strong advocate for this strategy because I think it's more failure prone and more expensive than necessary. But as you can see, the Jolie Pitt family did install the Daikin therma for their big old house, but they're not as cost sensitive as some people. Want to go into this a little bit more detail? This is a different central system. This is an apartment complex in Calistoga for farm workers. And we did save about $2,000 per residence for the construction cost, but we've found that, and this is true, we've seen in other studies, it takes about 2/3 more energy demand to operate it this way, because at least 1/3 of the energy is lost to the environment when it's circulating around. It's not like that with the small system for your house. You get pretty much all the energy that's being delivered from a hot water tank or an HVAC system. But when you recirculate it around in a big apartment building or underneath the ground, in the case of these 3 buildings, then you're using a lot of energy to heat the environment that is not your conditioned space. So much so that if you were to look at a boiler, for instance, a boiler with a 0.95 energy factor, the way boilers actually work, it's a 95, it would be a 0.475. 50% of the energy, or an equal amount of energy to what has been produced for consumption, is being lost. The system works twice as hard. It produces twice as much energy to deliver half as much. That's a really big problem in central systems that is coming out more clearly in research, and the best study was done in 2013 by Yanda Zhang. You can look that up, and it's the basis of a lot of the code on central systems in California right now. But that's important. Central systems waste as much as they use. It's not efficient on an energy side at all. It's just construction cost effective. This is, I think, an important thing for all you raters out there to know, is that hardwired fixtures are more expensive than screw-based fixtures, just a fixture. The bulbs that go into them, because a hardwired fixture has a less efficient ballast than is available on the market with bulbs that have an internal ballast, you are guaranteed to get a less efficient fixture if you do hardwired, and you are going to be guaranteed a more expensive bulb, because 80% of the market of LED bulbs are screw-in bulbs and 20% are pin-based. So you get a less efficient fixture with less choices, less color quality, and for more cost. And I encourage people to use the option within the energy code that says screw-based fixtures with dimmer switches. That's how you can also do it. And I hope that our code gets updated to reflect our laws, which have effectively banned incandescent bulbs at this point up to the 100-watt level, so that we stop worrying so much about what bulbs are going to get plugged in requiring pin-based fixtures as a consequence, because all the bulbs are good bulbs now. We don't have to have special fixtures to get our good bulbs out of the deal. So just putting that out there. Best bulbs are the screw-ins. Most efficient, least expensive, most choices. And code compliant if you put them on dimmer switches. Just a quick note here.
Hey, Sean?
Yes, Amy.
Quick question, too, on that LEDs with dimmer switches. What have you found in terms of the compatibility with dimmer switches and LEDs? Has it come a long way? So pretty much most LEDs are, work well with a variety of dimmers, or are there some things that folks should be looking out for to make sure those two are compatible?
Yeah. Good question. LEDs are more dimmable than CFLs, but you still have to actually look at the package to make sure that you're getting a dimmable one. So, a good point. I'm hoping that the 2019 code, which is not today, but the 2019 code does away with this dimmer switch nonsense, so we can just go back to having normal switches with screw-in bulbs that are high quality. But today, now, it would be a cost neutral, and I've had this bid out on 7 projects now. where I've had the owner go out and bid it. And we found that it was exactly neutral to go with the dimmer switches and the LED bulbs, or the hardwired CFLs or slash LEDs. So you just get a better quality and a lower energy consumption out of LEDs if you do a good job buying them with dimmer compatible bulbs. Okay. This is kind of a big deal. I want you guys all to see this. This is a landscape with rolled gravel. It's angular gravel, not pea gravel, so it kind of locks into place. And they put 4 inches of this down, rolled it with a heavy roller. It still accepts water. Rainwater goes right through it. It's a permeable surface, but it's not like cement. It doesn't have any glue in it. It's just rolled rock, really non-toxic, cheap, easy to install. And then we put soaker hoses underneath that to just dribble water at the root zones of these trees. So there's no sprinklers that pop up and get kicked off. There's no drip irrigation spaghetti that gets kicked and yanked and torn out. It's really stable, low water delivery, extremely little evaporation loss because there's no water above the surface. And it's a playable surface. Everyone can run around on this. And about 80% of children's play is done on hard surfaces. People misunderstand that all kids want green space. They want flat space. And they'd be happy with hard surfaces. It's fine. That's what they actually do most of their play on, with their balls and things like that. Not all of it, but put that out there. You can see that same apartment complex up from the sky. If you just look at the lower left-hand corner of the picture, you can see where people are sitting. You can see our ceremonial lawn. It's the one grass lawn, and the whole rest of the project is done with wood chips. Now, I wanted to this as lessons in who uses more energy. If you guys don't mind, I want to dig into this a little bit so you can see more deeply how populations behave, because I have seen a lot of misunderstandings that I want to counter. So, looking on the left, you have the green lines, and that is energy use per apartment. So it's a whole house energy consumption, and it's sorted by 1, 2, 3, and 4 bedrooms. Now, if this was a little bit better, you'd see at the right-hand side of each of these little clusters, there's a shorter line. That's the average. It should be different colored, so it's easier to understand, but it's not. So you can see, if you look at that line, that on the 1 bedrooms, there's 4 households that are above the average, and then there's like 8 households below. But see where the average is? And see how this happens over and over in each of the unit types, where the average is significantly pulled up by the highest consumer households. And there's always just a few. We're talking like 3 or 4 that are devastating, and then everyone else is more or less kind of normal. Now let's flip this and look, because you can see that the larger apartments, the 4 bedrooms, use more energy, which is true. Now if you go around, you can see per person, though, it's the 1-bedroom households that use the most energy. So the 1 bedrooms in purple now, and 2s and 3s and 4s. Per person, it's less. That's because things like the water heater are shared, the living room is shared, the kitchen is shared. A lot of the infrastructure of houses as they get larger is shared. And to understand that it's more efficient to have more people in a house. The more that things are shared, the less energy is used, fundamentally. And larger families, larger households use less energy per person than smaller households. It's not some wonderful thing that everyone's moving into smaller households. Per person, we're increasing our energy consumption as we take up more personal space. So that's a thought, just sort of speaking out on behalf of larger families. And look at this. So this is income versus consumption. More money equals more use. So this is not the only graph I could show you. It's just the one that I have absolutely amazing data on. And I can say for sure that the lowest income households of these farm workers, I mean, these people are making $7,000 a year or less. Actually, no, pardon me, that's 15, 13, that's 7. I was getting the scale wrong there. So about $10,000 to $15,000 for some of those lower households. And then when you get over when they're making $20,000 to $30,000, the more money they have, the more energy they consume. That's true for California. Generally, when you look at the RAS data from 2009, it's just true. The people who have more money are the problem. The people who have less money are the solution, because fundamentally, it's not personality driven. It's not a personal virtue. It's how people are. Everybody uses more if they have more. So maybe that's a good thing that our California state is so poor, but I don't think so, because instead we have the very rich population of California are disproportionately using energy, and they're wasting it like nobody's business. And you can see it when you look at water bills, how the very rich in our communities use ridiculous amounts more water per person. And it's true for energy. And I'll say it again, it's not a personal vice. It is a human behavior pattern. So I did want to get into this question, though. Now that you've seen all this variation, are people generally predictable, I think is a fair question to ask. So I did a study on this. I've done a number of studies on this, but this is my favorite. This is where I had 2 apartment complexes that were built 1 year apart by the same developer using the same plans. They're like itty-bitty tiny differences in their floor plans, but they're the same plans, the same square footages, all the rest of it. And what we found was that the 2 bedrooms between the 2 apartment complexes on the other sides of the road, but different people, they were only 6% apart on average, and the 3 bedrooms were only 3% apart on average. To me, that says that's perfect. One population, and keep in mind that one is 32 units total, and the other one is 94 units total. So these are relatively small population sizes that are predicting each other, is how you could look at it. Does one tell you what the other one's going to use? And yes, pretty darn close. Populations behave in a predictable way. Now, and the larger your study, the more predictable it can be. This project is really fun. It's 260 apartments. We did an energy model in which we predicted utility bills at about $10.88 and $13, you see there, for the total utility bill. And when we actually got the entire apartment complex's utility bills, we were literally less than 50 cents off on both. We were like 42 cents off on one and 30-something cents off on the other. We were accurate to within 1% for the entire population. But when we looked just at a subset of them, when we looked at the subset of 2 bedrooms and the subset of 3 bedrooms, in that case we were 12% and 8% off. We had to look at the entire population to see if it predicted the utility bill prediction for the entire population. And at that point, when the sample is big enough, yes. But you have to understand, there's so much erratic, unpredictable behavior that your smaller sample sizes, such as the house owner or homeowner that you are personally interviewing who's like, your model makes no sense. It doesn't predict my energy consumption at all. You hear a lot of that, like owners getting really pissed that your predictions don't match their reality. And it's impossible. You couldn't do it. You cannot meet anybody and predict what their energy consumption is. I'm just positive at this point. I've looked at so many of these situations. You could predict the average, and you have to explain that to people, that individuals are not the same as the average, and our modeling software just predicts averages, and it's really accurate to populations, and individuals might use 6 times as much energy in any given day as some other person in an identical apartment with the same household size and the same income. It's just that different, 6 times. I've seen 10 times difference in like identical apartments, but at least 6 times everywhere I look. But this different apartment complex, we did a very bad job of modeling it, and I don't know why, but I suspect why. This project is in Palm Springs. It's the hottest, most extreme climate in California, and all these apartments have really old air conditioners, so like 20-year-old air conditioners, and last summer we had the hottest summer on record. So if you look at in the lower left-hand corner, you can see the blue line is what the 2008 code plus a bunch of other modeling tools for appliances and lighting and plug loads would say. The red line is what the 2013 code, actually, let me reverse that, I apologize. The 2013 is in blue, the 2008 is in red, and the 2013 code was supposed to be fixed to predict lower air conditioning use. So you see that, it's predicting lower use as you approach July. The black line is what actually happened as the average of those apartments. And you'll notice that hardly any one of those individual apartments that we have in color actually exist below or even on that average, the predicted lines. Almost everybody was above those. So on the right-hand side, I point the finger and I say, look, last summer was the hottest summer ever. And our models, if you don't know this, heads up, Energy Pro assumes the climate of at least 5 years ago, but it's 5 to 10, even 15 years ago, depending upon where you are in the state. So when you're predicting 2016's utility bills with 2011 to 2005 data, you're going to fail because it's been hotter almost every year since 1980 or something like that. It's so that's a problem, I think. All right, I don't think our models predict air conditioning loads, and it's more of a problem as you get further inland. How are we doing, by the way? I want to take a pause before I go into some really gnarly graphs. Do people have any questions that I can answer?
I don't see any coming through the chat, but so people should type them in if they have them, but I have a couple.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I'll go through a couple and other folks can kind of chime in. So let's see. I'll start with kind of tenant engagement piece, and that it is a challenge, but it's definitely something I think property owners are very interested in doing. You know, it's a topic a lot to get folks kind of vested in a project, to feel that ownership, to feel engaged, to understand the impacts of, you know, living in, you know, a net zero energy project, but, you know, knowing that there's not as much savings there as you may expect. So how have you been kind of approaching this with property owners to either support or still encourage tenant engagement when, you know, there's not maybe as much savings as people would think, but there is an important, I think, social benefit to that effort, as well as, you know, some savings effort. But how have you been approaching and maybe trying to encourage tenant engagement?
Well, there's two stories. So one project, we're giving people letters, and every month we get the property site manager walks around and writes down what people's utility meters say, and then they fill out a spreadsheet and send it to us, and we do an autofill letter back to everybody saying, this is what your consumption was compared to the average for the other two-bedroom apartments of your neighbors, right? And that, I think, helps people understand where they are, if they are a conserving household or not conserving household. When we've done a 1 month competition where we really pushed it, we got to see people at the building level. A building would save energy somewhere between 3 and 18.5% for the whole building if we really encouraged everyone to save. Gave them an award, you know, ran a competition, really pushed it. So I've seen that as the theoretical maximum energy savings that you can get if you are doing everything possible. You might be able to get a whole building to do 18.5% energy savings. On a different project, the one that's mutual housing at Spring Lake that you have certified as ZNE, well, that one's a bit of a problem because there's some of the households there have disabled people. One in particular, a 4-bedroom apartment, has 2 disabled children in the household and a partially disabled father. So they live in the house. And I found this as well with the folks who are senior citizens who are shut-ins at this point. They don't really leave their house. They use their energy in an entirely different way. So the owner has been fielding complaints from some of the highest energy-using households at mutual housing at Spring Lake, saying, hey, this isn't really a zero-net energy household. This isn't, you know, you guys lied to us. is misrepresented. And the tenant education component is to help people understand, I think, where they are relative to other people, and it wasn't a lie. There's an average, and people, nobody knows how much energy they use. It's just confusing to the point of being like, it's like asking what air looks like. You know, it's invisible. People don't see electricity in their walls. So having an education component has been helpful for the owners to explain that why their zero net energy household is not performing that way for these people. That's, I've found, is like a utility to it. Does that answer your question, though?
It does, and I think one, I guess, comment I have is that I think there's, I'm not sure if I would characterize it as maybe quality of life or some opportunity, you know, some benefit of tenant engagement, not just to achieve some energy savings or the utility of, you know, the property owner understanding it, but if you're looking at kind of that three-pronged approach to tenant engagement, information, social engagement with the other communities, there is that social benefit, creating maybe more of a vested element for tenants living in the project. But maybe a little bit more engaged, and so there's a little bit more of a social community benefit to it, and not just maybe just energy savings. Yeah.
I don't know. What I've seen is that tenants deeply appreciate having tiny utility bills. They don't mind paying more rent. They do mind having big utility bills. It scares them when they get big in the summertime or big in the wintertime. So I think that empowering people to understand how the utility bills work is good. I mean, because people frequently don't know exactly what to do in order to save energy. They don't know what things in their house use what. And as you can see, when people have less money, they start making some difficult choices about what they're going to do to stay alive and fed at the same time. And so you can see people, you know, using their oven or something like that to heat just one room, things that go down as people lose money. So I think that education can be helpful for giving people practical skills when they have very little money to learn how to live in their house on the solar budget that they have. Because what I've seen is that, you know, a lot of these low-income tenants, if they could, they would not use any more energy than their solar array produced, so they would never have utility bills. But they don't know exactly how. And I'll say it again, people don't change that much. It's very hard.
Right.
So I think that it's important to do, but it's not the only holy grail. I just think it's one of the important things to do.
Right. I agree. Okay, so then I have one other question, then you can keep continuing on.
No, this is
I have one comment though too, in terms of thinking about how to live in a net zero energy house. One of the things that I struggle with, and I'll leave this as a comment, and then I'll ask my other question, is when we talk about code ZNE, it has this TDV metric in it, and so somebody was asking me questions about, well, how would you assist somebody? What kind of education or engagement would you have somebody? Would you give somebody to live in a code ZNE house? I was like, I don't know how I would instruct somebody to live in a code, you know, using TDV as a metric for ZNE.
Well, it makes no sense. That's insane. That's like, people shouldn't even ask that question. And it's like, how do fish fly? Fish don't fly. You know, they're in the water. It's like there isn't a TDV ZNE house. When I ran two projects through 7 different climate zones, I found the exact same apartment complex having radically different TDV budgets and having nothing to do with the energy consumption. I actually cut that slide out of this, and maybe I shouldn't have, but I showed a comparison of TDV metrics to kilowatt hours consumption in different projects. The numbers are gobbledygook. They're a grid management equation that is unknowable to me. I've never been able to figure out exactly how they do the TDV calculation, and has no relationship with energy consumption. It's just divorced. They're not the same number. And people are going to be pissed because they think that zero net energy really means utility bills. That's pretty much the only thing that people think about. And if they had a PVV zero net energy house, I mean, yeah, I'm just disappointed that we're even talking about that. Like that makes no sense to any consumer. It's the hardest thing to sell, and all it makes sense to is PG&E, sort of, and nobody else.
And I think, just dealing with two metrics are things that folks be, running up against in probably two ways, depending on how things roll out for the 2020 code, or if jurisdictions are adopting a ZNE ordinance. I think as consultants, as raters, we have to, find a way to navigate this really confusing multiple metrics, and in some cases kind of nonsensical metrics to how we operate the building. But I'll leave that at that. And so here's my other question for you, Sean, in thinking about central domestic hot water systems. Is there, through the work of Jan de Zeng in 2013 and kind of through the findings now and kind of thinking toward 2016 or 2019 code, are there ways that we can start thinking about central domestic hot water systems for multifamily buildings that include, compact design or, specific runs or like smaller runs, smaller recirc runs? So you're not kind of recircling the whole building. So is there kind of discussion, or have you seen work kind of focusing on that where we can say, okay, we're still going to do a central system in this property, but here's how we can overcome some of these, heat loss issues and energy loss issues with doing a slightly different, distribution?
Well, okay, so Jan de Zeng, he has a contract with TRC. Anyway, Jan de Zeng has been working with me on that Ethan Terrace project, the one that I showed you, those 80-gallon boilers, quote unquote, because that is an example of a compact, decentralized system where there's 12 different tanks and they're serving smaller circuits. And that seems to be the compromise direction, is that there should be less volume circulating, and we should have the demands tailored to smaller groups so that one person using water in the whole apartment building isn't triggering everyone's water to turn on and circulate. So that seems to be like a thought leader progress point. But he's still working on trying to find pilot projects for new construction, and all I could show him was my existing construction project that happened to be set up that way, that we're doing heat pumps on. So I don't know if there are solutions on the central system side. You and I are on a grant to do research on this because it's what Jan de Zeng found when he surveyed 50-plus buildings, is that nobody, including the people who actually had systems supposedly installed to control, nobody's controls worked, and hardly anybody had them. It's like, this is it. What I hear from him is that there's no consistent practice in designing central systems, and so they're terribly designed, and everyone's brand new exploration design, and they have all sorts of weird hookups where they cross over between cold and hot water, and it seems to me like the practice itself of designing central systems is not very well done, and almost maybe won't ever get well done.
So there may be more to come on that, hopefully, if we can, more studies, more evaluation, and maybe we'll see, better design recommendations or engineering of those systems to be more efficient.
I think that'd be awesome. The decentralized approach is not significantly more expensive than a central approach. It is somewhat, but that PV array has to be included in it now. So if there is increased energy consumption from a central system, it's not just cheaper to construct because you didn't put as much square footage of area for a water heater. Now you have to think about that solar array. And when that first cost gets equated in with the energy loss from the recirculating system, then I think we're going to see decentralized systems being much more cost competitive to do ZNE than central systems.
Got it. Thanks.
That might solve itself, where people realize it's just too darn wasteful to do a central system.
All right. Those are my questions for now, so you can keep going.
Okay. Well, thank you. Those are good questions. The rest of this I'm going to show you to get a sense of how these apartments use energy. I think it's interesting. So these are the apartments that we studied. We had the Canary instruments, those color sensors hooked up. They did second-by-second data collection. They're in Dixon, Lakeport, King City, Woodland, and Oxnard. And what we found, I think it's interesting to see that look at where it's 4/24/15 to about that month of April and May. That's when there's the least HVAC loads. And these apartment complexes across the entire state of California are all using about the same amount of energy at that time of the year. And this is an example of how people are predictable. The weather isn't, but when you take weather out, then almost everybody in these one-bedroom apartments is using the same amount of energy, more or less. But when it gets warmer in the summer, you see them not using the same amount. But it's kind of fun to see, for instance, if you match the brown up with the blue, those two sites are 20 miles apart. And they use energy very similar to each other. Interesting thing to know, the brown one is staying up higher than the blue line a lot of the times, and that is because their domestic hot water tank's thermostat was not in the water. And so we discovered from monitoring that all 61 water tanks at Spring Lake, the brown color, were broken essentially. They were running at 135 degrees 24/7, which is why the energy consumption never drops like you should see it compared to the blue. For me, I came to understand how important it is to meter things to catch large construction failures. We could not have figured this out without studying Dixon and Spring Lake at the same time to go, why is Dixon using so much less but Spring Lake isn't, and why do they match up sometimes and not other times? So that is worth monitoring. And you can see it again here, Spring Lake versus Dixon. That's another example. But notice once again about 4/24 how everyone's lined up in the spring. It's the best time of the year to study non-HVAC loads. You can see it again for the 3 bedrooms, consistency as well as inconsistency, and people more or less lining up in the springtime. And then 4 bedrooms, which we had a smaller sample size, and you can again see them line up and see where they vary. So Oxnard being a climate that has almost no heating load or cooling load. They don't have air conditioners. They have electric resistant strip heaters in this apartment complex. So if you see increased loads in the wintertime, and you do see them go up a little bit, it's partly because of electricity heat, but partly because plug loads increase in the winter, and that's a big load. The plug loads are larger in the winter, smaller in the summer, and in Los Angeles area, that makes a significant difference where you'll see more energy use in the winter, but it's not heating related. Then I want to show you what it looked like to compare to the model. So the black is the average, all the colors are the many different people that are overlapping in Oxnard, and the black line that sort of stair steps was our model. You can see how they were consuming a little bit less during the summer than we thought, but a little bit more during the winter than we thought. Balanced out well. 2-bedroom apartments in Dixon, all the way up. And this is, once again, I'm going to say, notice that people are way all over the map. Their average consumption is relatively predictable, but they themselves are not. I could just say that over and over looking at these graphs, but my gosh. Here's the 2 bedrooms in Spring Lake. When you see cooking, we found that people are cooking less than our model predicted. The model was created back in 1998, and for the last 20 years or so, people have consistently cooked a little bit less everywhere you go. We did find, though, that Oxnard, which is the only project that we looked at for cooking energy, which is farm workers, those farm workers, they actually cook their food, and unlike almost everybody else. And so their consumption is pretty close to the prediction. But this one is Lakeport. This is a whole bunch of seniors. All of them are seniors. And you can see they cooked 85% less than predicted. And when we asked them, a lot of them said, like, yeah, I don't cook. So there's differences in populations. On cooking, it's kind of cute to see that the least cooking day is Monday, the second of those bars. These are different apartment sizes, 1s, 2s, 3s, and 4s. That's the day people cook less. We made a nice little graph showing a new cooking algorithm. What's interesting is that this algorithm, the pink line that's going through all the different data points, that's like a third higher than normal households. Low-income people do follow the studies that I've read. The less money you have, the more you cook, the less you eat out. And people might think that being low income means that you eat a lot at McDonald's or something like that, but the statistics prove that no, they actually cook more in their houses, and richer people are the ones going to McDonald's. If you really don't have money, you buy groceries and you cook it. So that was sort of like a revelation on how income affects cooking energy. Quick on domestic hot water, if you're interested, that other really big load. This is a weekday versus weekend, and the seniors, and notice that there's no peaks. It's because seniors get up and take showers and bathe themselves at like any hour of the day. They have totally irregular sleep cycles. So the Lakeport Senior Housing, we had a flat demand, no real peaks. But the difference is now we go over to a family apartment complex, and although these are still one bedrooms, they have one bedroom people that work. That's for families and for working age folks. And they have peaks in the morning and the evening. And you can see the 3-bedroom folks, as you might expect, they have even bigger peaks when people get up and shower all more or less in the same period of time. So it's down in King City. You can see it here in Dixon, the 1s, the 2s, and the 3s, how they have different peaks and different amounts of energy consumption. This is over a year. So you can see how the variation versus, and the black squiggly line versus the black model in Dixon. This is what the 1-bedroom load generally looks like when you average everyone in together. You can see here huge variation. There's a couple of these households that are using a lot of electric resistance heating, but most everyone is using just the hybrid mode and keeping their consumption of electricity, because this is electricity consumption, pretty flat for 1-bedrooms. The 2-bedrooms on average, combining all the projects together, it's more bimodal. The 3-bedrooms have even larger humps, and a couple, like there's 3 of them sort of, maybe 4. You can see them all lined up now together, no confusion of all the different data points, just the summary there. And that, I want you to see, this is weekday. Look how smooth it is. Just look at the smoothness of the line versus the same household on the weekend. And this tells you a lot about how people are on weekends and versus weekdays, where it's much more erratic. Their energy, domestic hot water consumption at least, it's much more erratic on a weekend than it is on a weekday. Not surprising, but kind of fun to see. And in Title 24 energy modeling, there are different use algorithms for weekdays versus weekends. So that's not new to the Energy Commission, but it was fun to see in detail. And that's it. That's all the slides I had for you today. Just trying to give you the big picture on how we do zero net energy, how we finance it, some of the items that we use, and for me, the revelation that the 2016 code essentially is a zero net energy design code at this point. I don't know what 2019 will look like, but how we do zero net energy, which is successful, is what the 2016 code looks like pretty much. So I guess my point would be is at this time in history, new construction in California is ready to solarize and would probably be profitable for people to solarize if they had the upfront capital to do it. They would make money in the long haul.
So then, Sean, if we think about 2016 code, if folks build to the code for the regulated loads, domestic hot water, heating and cooling,
right?
And then if they address the other end uses in some sort of prescriptive manner for lighting, plug loads.
Yep. If they did Energy Star appliances, Energy Star lighting, those sort of prescriptive standards that are out there, we just buy a product that has the label on it, that would be good enough. I mean, if you could get more versions of it, that'd be smart, but it's good enough.
And then you'd be ready to solarize, and you'd be able to, be offsetting that load with PV, and getting toward a net zero energy home based on site energy.
Yes. And if you used electricity, you would save, as I think you pointed out earlier, it would save construction costs to do an electric-only project because the dual fuel systems of adding additional infrastructure, gas costs at least $800 per apartment to add gas infrastructure, like $200 per hookup and some shared cost for trenching to the building. But even leaving out the meter set, the trenching and the plumbing of gas always cost more money, like $800 per apartment. So if people would just stick with all electric devices, they'd reduce their upfront construction cost and make it even easier for them to put a PV array on the roof to 100% offset. But it appears to me now that, yeah, just doing this code and buying the Energy Star stuff off the shelf, anyone could do a zero net energy household at this point if their consumption was average. And if their consumption is twice the average, which some people are, then they have to put up twice the solar array. But they can still do it.
Right. And then in terms of thinking about some of the limitations of getting to a net zero energy project, you've been able to demonstrate it up to 3 stories for multifamily, is that right?
Yeah.
Or 4? Okay.
Well, we've done 3 stories consistently without it being a problem. And I'd say if you look at the Bullitt Center in Seattle, that one's a 5-story. But the way that they do it is they have an overhang. And so I have a project in Sacramento that's for lesbian, bisexual, gay, transgender, LGBTQ senior citizens. And they want to do 100% ZNE offset. And it's 3 stories, and they're going to put a canopy on the roof so that they can take advantage of the entire solar availability of that roof. And that strategy means that all their compressors can be underneath it. They have all the mechanical equipment space that they need, and that is a way to go up to 5 stories. You can do like 3 stories with using all of the roof. You can do 2 stories while using some of the roof, and you can do 4 stories and 5 stories with current technologies by either putting the most efficient equipment in, including the most efficient solar panels, or overhanging the roof a little bit.
Got it. So those are really good strategies for folks to talk with multifamily developers about when you're getting into that mid-rise category. And those are reasonable options. You know, it's not extraordinary to kind of deal with those overhangs and kind of create that opportunity to kind of create more of a roof so you can have more panels or do a canopy. So I think that's really good for people to hear.
Yeah. What I see is buildings that are built right up to the property line still have access to the airspace above, and so you'll see them put, for instance, like awnings over windows so they can get shading, But that thing sits out into the public right-of-way 2-3 feet, and nobody says anything about that. That's fine, as long as you're up above the sidewalk a ways. So it seems to me or in the same way, a project will plant shade trees that hang out over both the sidewalk and the road. No one says that's wrong. So I think putting a solar array that shades the building a little bit, that's 4 or 5 stories up above, it doesn't seem to hurt anybody, and it's been allowed. So I think it's a good way to go forward.
Yeah, that's good to know. Does anybody else have any other questions? I mean, for me, I would say if any questions come in, I think
Okay.
As I'm looking ahead to 2016 and thinking about Greenpoint Rated and thinking about those stakeholder groups to revise our standards, some of this information is coming to mind to think about what are the measures or how should things be structured to make sure there is enough flexibility to support ZNE and take into account some of the issues that you brought up in this presentation. So we'll probably be talking more.
I look forward to it. Anything else you want? I don't know. Hey, as long as we're here, Amy, you were just at Housing California. Did you see anything that's important for us raters and zero net energy folks?
This is a good question. Yeah, I am on my way back from Housing California. There was not a lot of discussion on ZNE. Actually, I don't even know if there was one presentation on it, which was unfortunate. But there was a lot of discussion on greenhouse gas emissions and benefits and impacts that projects are having, whether it's for something like the Affordable Housing Sustainable Communities program that are funded through cap and trade, different tools like Green Trip to show vehicle miles traveled and other benefits when you're close to centers. So there's a lot of discussion on GHGs and the impacts of development, so that was pretty interesting. And then, let's see, what was some of the other things that I was thinking? Then there was a number of discussions on health, which I thought was pretty interesting in terms of thinking about how to coordinate more with hospitals and community benefits to start integrating health and housing more. So that seems to be a pretty popular topic, not necessarily for from an implementation standpoint for raters or consultants, but I think the takeaway for raters and consultants is that this is a prime topic of conversation, and that I think developers are looking for these multiple benefits of environmental and health as well as affordable, and kind of thinking about how we can serve that. So that's an opportunity there. And then, like I said, the greenhouse gas emissions and demonstrate the benefits that developments are having. So
that's cool. Well, you know, this zero net energy part of it, when I've examined the question, houses, buildings, residences consume or produce, I should say, 14% of the greenhouse gas emissions in California, whereas transportation is about 37%. So the zero net energy building strategy is really important, but the transportation strategy is inarguably more important. And so I guess the weighting of that at the conference was maybe not proper, but it was kind of like it should be.
Well, really and I think if we tie them together, like there is through SB 350, as we're looking at regional transportation and housing, and we can think about the two and they're inextricably linked, then we can take on both of those arenas of the 33% or that we said for transportation, as well as the 14, and I've even heard 18% for residential.
I gotcha. Yeah. And the first thing that comes to my mind is that because there's excess solar production during a lot of the day, having these buildings solarized means there's an opportunity to plug in electric cars and store it. And I'm not the first person to say this, but that's a big benefit. You know, it's not bad to drive your car. It's bad to drive your car that has a gas engine in it. And if we can work with electrification of cars and zero net energy housing, that's a place where you'd be making the solar, where you've got the voltage all set up, where, you know, that would be a great place to start. Or zero net energy housing, zero net transportation.
Yep, I agree. And I think that people find it a little bit somewhat at odds sometimes, because I think about if you do too many EV charging stations or vehicles, we're actually putting more load on the grid, is what it seems. But again, it depends on your load balancing, and if you're charging them during the day, then you're getting that storage and you're leveraging the renewable source.
Yeah, scheduling is where it's all at. Like the domestic hot water being such a big load, it doesn't have to be a bad load. It can be scheduled in the middle of the night and just heat the water up to 160 degrees, put a tempering valve on it, and now you've got your battery of energy for the whole day. And similarly, the cars can be charged at different times of the day to make sure that they're not a tax on the grid. But the bigger thought is that our grid is supposed to expand. Like, this is what we need to do. We shouldn't presume that because we're increasing loading on the grid that that's a bad thing. That's what we have to do. We have to start using electricity as our medium. It's not gas. So, but anyway, it sounds like we're at a good spot. Amy, I'm looking forward to talking with you offline soon. Unless there's any other questions, we'll conclude this and say it was fun.
It was Excellent. So, Bianca, do you want to kind of close this out here? But I think from Sean and I, thank you guys very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. Well, thank you so much, both of you, and for everyone who joined us on the webinar today. All right. Have a good day, everyone. Bye.
Bye. Thank
Bye.
you.